Hi, Allan Vyhnalek here with the University of Nebraska, talking to you today about some pasture management issues. To get more information, you can go to the CAP website, cap.unl.edu, and you don't have to look under succession. You can just go to that website by itself, and then you can find some more stuff on pastures and other leasing arrangements. So this is a short program just to share some thoughts that I have about setting up a good pasture lease. It's based on what I hear happening in Nebraska. No research study or textbook here. It's just what we find out happening in the neighborhoods. However, I would share that every neighborhood tends to be a little bit different. What the landlord tenant agreed to is more important than anything I've got to say about what I think a good lease arrangement is, although I'll give you what I hear from Nebraskans, and whatever you guys set up is more important than what anything I've got to say about this whole thing. The first thing you have to do when you have a pasture lease is to think about what's going to happen if you have a bad situation or a bad outcome because of fire, drought, and hail. The big three issues that take away pasture and make it less available to cattle or sheep or whatever you're grazing. So I think the discussion has to be handled between the landlord and the tenant before the lease starts about how you're going to deal with fire, drought, and hail. I don't have any specific recommendations here. All I'm saying is, please have that discussion, and please think about how that could work, and think about what's going to happen. What's going to happen? Are you going to shut the lease off and get the cattle out of the pasture if there's nothing to graze? Are you going to lower the rent? Are you going to? Well, I heard of one situation where a landlord provided the tenant with some cash to cover purchasing hay because they couldn't provide the pastures the tenant had paid for, and so there's all kinds of situations out there. Just have that discussion ahead of time so that if there's a shortage of grass, it can be handled without difficulty. You know what's going to happen. Fencing. It's for a pasture lease to start. The fence is between the new landlord and the new tenant, it's assumed that there's going to be a good fence. Then the tenant's responsible for taking care of the fence going into the future from year to year. They provide the labor, and the landlord typically in Nebraska provides the materials, which is being posted in the wire. The Nebraska fence law was amended, I think it's about 10 years ago now. Fence reviews used to be argued in front of a township trustees. Now they're argued in front of the judge or a court. And so you probably need to hire an attorney to make sure that happen. And so that's how the fence laws were amended. However, the fence laws themselves are typically basically the same as they always have been. There's just no understand that if someone needs a boundary fence or a fence to hold livestock in, and there is no boundary fence, then the right-hand rule still applies. You go to the middle of the property and you turn right, and that's your half of the fence to take care of. And the neighbor is still required to put up their half of the fence, even if they have no livestock. And there's some specific requirements for that fencing, like posts every so many feet. And I think it's a 4-wire barbed wire fence. You can't identify or specify something more elaborate or more expensive than that. Okay, so just look those laws up and you'll have that information. So there's always a debate or there's always questions that come into our office about how to handle weeds and trees. Typically, the responsibility for taking care of noxious weeds lies with the tenant, and typically all tree control issues lie with the landlord. And the main thing is they just have to be taken care of, especially the noxious weeds. That's a legal requirement. And the tree side should go be a landlord thing. Just know that sometimes the tenant has the equipment to handle that tree control for the landlord, and they should be compensated for their work either to reduce rent or through compensation, actually paying for the time they put out there. The biggest thing I want to say about tree control is make sure you get them early. Don't let them get to be 5, 6 foot, 7 foot tall, and then try to control them. It gets expensive then. If you get them at 3 foot or less, you have a much easier time. You have a variety of methods available to you. And there's actually videos and information out there from agronomy on how to handle easterns and red cedars at different heights and that sort of thing. So I'm not going to go into the actual specifics on that, but just please get your trees handled while they're short and young, and you have a lot more options available to you. Typically, fertilizer is only discussed in eastern Nebraska, only when there's enough moisture to support fertilizer typically. And it's typically a tenant expense. and it's typically used on cool season pastures. And understand your timing on when you apply the fertilizer is going to change if you have a cool season pasture versus a warm season pasture. So make sure you have those right. Check with an agronomist in your area to make sure you have that timing set up right. And those are what the main things I think about when we set up a pasture lease. And just understand that maybe try and get 1 or 2 more videos cut here this week. And I'm glad to have you listen in, and I appreciate your time. Have a good day.